I'm Claire Edwards, and you're listening to Authentic Leadership, a series of conversations, insights and inspirations with leaders who are real, raw and authentic. Today I bring you such an insightful conversation with Jeanette Allom-Hill on the topic of leading with grit and grace. My conversation with Jeanette could have gone in any direction, as every time she answered a question, another gem of a story of leadership philosophy unfolded. Our conversation begins with Jeanette sharing how her earliest of decisions to carve a deliberate, eclectic leadership career has shaped her journey of working across the globe in the public and private sector. Enjoy. Jeanette Allom-Hill, as we speak, is in transition, having just left her position as Group Executive for Business Performance for the Sunshine Coast Council, and very soon to be, taking up a position with Boston Consulting Group, commuting from the Sunshine Coast to Canberra when the planes start flying again. Jeanette was recently named the winner of the 2020 Telstra Queensland Business Women's Public Sector and Academia Award from a field of 22,000 entrants. Her response to the win? It just confirms I'm doing the right thing, being authentic, brave and courageous, but doing it with kindness and heart. Oh my goodness, how much I love that. If you're a regular listener to Authentic Leadership, you'll know exactly why I'm so excited to be in conversation with Jeanette. So let's just get straight to it. Jeanette, welcome to Authentic Leadership.
Thank you so much for having me. What an incredible title. That in itself absolutely attracted me to having an opportunity to talk to you. So thank you. It's an honour.
Oh, lovely. That makes my heart sing, Jeanette. Thank you. Now, I thought I normally start with an easy question and a background question, but I've just decided to throw you straight in it because, reading through your career, it's, talk about an eclectic career portfolio, to say the least. So senior roles in telecoms, IT, state government, consulting, local government. And I'm always hugely curious about people who've been successful in leadership in both government and the private sector. So Jeanette, I mean, if there was, I know it's a bit tough, but if there was one thread that you could weave through all of your leadership positions, one trait or attribute that actually makes the industry sector irrelevant, what would that be?
That's a brilliant question, and thank you so much for starting with an incredibly hard question. No, not at all. I love it, and you're right. I love it when you said eclectic, because often in my early career I used to get that from recruiters. I don't so much now because it really was an incredibly deliberate path for me, and it always has been. It started early, sort of when I had a mentor in my Microsoft days who really mentored us, and Microsoft did as well, on being strengths-based leaders. And when you ask me a trait or an attribute that has gone all the way through every single role I've had, it started with that. So not only has every career choice I made been incredibly deliberate based on what I wanted my endpoint to be, but in every single role I've started with, what are my strengths? What are my top 5 strengths? What am I good at? And how do I make sure that I choose a role that allows me to shine in regards to those strengths? So that's been really deliberate all the way through. So even when I look at roles, Claire, I'll look at them based on the fact that they align very well to my top 5 strengths, and then maybe my 10 strengths. And even if there's a couple that don't, I will make sure that I look at people around me to fill in those things that I don't have. So strengths would be something that would absolutely be all the way through. The other very big thing for me, and has got better with time, is who I stand for as a leader, and looking at roles and organisations that really promote authentic leadership, that see leadership as being a key to success in the organisation, and organisations that I know that I can have an opportunity to influence in regards to the power of great leadership in an organisation's ability to deliver. So those are things I always look for in regards to what would pull me through in every single role that I've done.
Oh, fabulous. And I can just imagine you in an interview, and where you're pretty much interviewing the interviewer and asking them about the culture of leadership in the organization. Do you do things like that?
Yes. That really does happen. And it was funny when you asked me the question, I was thinking about when I took the role at Sunshine Coast Council. One of the reasons I took it, the two paths you talk about, the deliberate endpoint for me, I had a great mentor who talked about my career as being pieces of a puzzle. So for me, when I think about the choices I make, I've been very deliberate to go private. I've been deliberate to go public. I've been deliberate to go depth and breadth of public. So state, federal, local. So when I was looking for my next step, which was local government, I was looking for, things that were important to me, like a really good budget. I had an $848 million budget. A good sized leadership team to lead and manage, the backbone of an organisation, a really good corporate services portfolio that was sort of broad and deep and could really impact the organisation. But above and beyond that, I was looking for leadership. And what really attracted me to Sunshine Coast Council, as part of the interview pack, they sent me their leadership charter, which had been pulled together and worked with them through Ben Delta. And it was the most incredible leadership charter. It talked about the value set of leadership and what they wanted their leaders to be and how they wanted their leaders to role model, and all the traits that really attracted me in regards to my ability to lead. And that was one of the reasons that I continued to explore that opportunity, because of that leadership charter and knowing that I could do it and bring value to it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's strong. And so I'd love to go back to in your opening, when you talked about your mentor at Microsoft and Microsoft having that strengths-based approach. What were some of those core strengths that your mentor helped develop in you, and those core strengths that have taken you all the way through your leadership career?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And it's Gallup Strength Finder. So anybody who's listening who's really interested in, determining your strengths, but also I've now moved on to doing strengths-based leadership, for me, those learnings are just so incredibly powerful in regards to how you can lead. And you actually do a self-assessment. So it's not that you develop the strengths, it tells you what your strengths are. What are my top 5 strengths? So my number 1 strength is strategic. So that's my ability to very clearly see what the future looks like and be able to see how I get there. Another one of my strengths is maximizer. So I like to take everything and make it great. So that's a bit of a transformation skill. My 3rd strength is relator, which means that I love people, I love developing, I love bringing people along a journey. My 4th strength is focus, so my ability to get the task done. And my 5th strength is communication, so my ability to articulate. So they are who I am. So to develop them that's just experience and time. And sometimes, I might do something that helps me with strategy from an innovation framework perspective, but they're who my makeup, and developing it is just about spending time actually doing things that really enhance those skills.
And when I look at those 5 skills, this makes now absolute sense. All the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. If you look at the balance between strategic, maximizer, and focus, and then you've got that relator and communication, that basically sums up that your philosophy of leading with grit and grace, because you've got that balance.
That's so true. No one's ever said it like that, and that really resonates with me. Actually, I was thinking about that because the strengths sit in quadrants in Gallup. So they sit in quadrants that are about delivery, quadrants that are about people, quadrants that are about stakeholder, and I over the years have really made sure that I'm developing the strengths in all of those. But when you said that, I was like, you know what, you're completely right. Those those strengths do align to the way that I function and the way that I think, because they're who I am. I love that connection. Thank you for that. I'm going to use that. Is that okay? I like that a lot. Very
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what I'd love to sort of explore a little bit more now, is that because I suppose in my experience, I've come across a lot of leaders who've maybe struggled a little bit with that even balance, and the whole essence of authentic leadership is about being in conversation with leaders who demonstrate those 21st century leadership skills of balancing the strategic and the human, the courage and the vulnerability. And
Yeah.
so if we just separate grit and grace for one moment, Jeanette, what
Yeah.
does leading with grit mean to you?
I'm just picking up my brand new little puppy who's barking her lungs out at my feet. So so apologies, listeners, for the little puppy barking, but she's decided she'd like to bark at my feet. Yeah,
That's
leading
cool.
with grit and
I
grace.
love
Yeah, it's reality, isn't it? And I think that's a bit of authenticity too, isn't it? To not pretend something isn't happening when it is. There you go. There's a little life lesson. So for me, and I think everybody would have different definitions of what grit and grace mean for them. So I think it's really important to start with what they mean for me, and then talk a little bit about how do you balance them and why they're important. So for listeners who are thinking about, oh, I really like this concept of grit and grace, think about what it might mean for you in regards to your strengths and how you lead and what resonates with you, because the way I think about it might not resonate with you and therefore it's not going to be effective. But, in summary, grit for me, I always say, is being brave, gutsy and courageous. And they're the words that I learnt when I was working at Boston. They were talking a lot about women in leadership and characteristics, and those three words really, really resonated with me in regards to what grit might mean. And then I thought about it more deeply, and I thought, for me, what that means is knowing that with great power comes great responsibility, and that's how that resonates with me, that I'm brave enough every day to bring my true self. But for some people, other parts of that grit can be things like having a vision, having determination, having resilience to be able to recover quickly. That's a really big one for me. Being able to learn quickly, having courage to stand up. So my greatest advice would be translate it to what it means for you, words that really resonate with you. And for me, it's brave, gutsy and courageous, and knowing that with great power comes great responsibility, and holding myself accountable for being authentic. And then grace, for me,
Okay.
I think about
Before we go,
yeah, cool.
sorry, Jeanette, before we go on to
No, go
grace,
for
because
it.
I'd really like to delve a little bit into this. And so just for people who are listening, I get a series of questions and I send them to who I'm in conversation with, but we often end up going down a completely different route. So if I'm putting you on the spot, Jeanette, just tell me.
Not
What
at
I'm
all.
really
I
curious
like
about
it.
is, are you able to think of an example where calling on that courage, those guts, that being brave, made a significant difference into maybe a move in your career or a decision you had to make? Where's grit really helped you?
It's a great question, Claire. I think grit helps you in everything. I was trying to think of a specific example for you, because there's probably been many in every single role I've had. For me, it translates into, I think early in your career, and, this is a generic example, but probably early in my career, I would do mentoring, and, I might have had some opportunities to speak at conferences, and I would get up and say, the behaviour you walk past is the behaviour you accept, or, with great power comes great responsibility. And never really had particularly Microsoft days, because, that was an organisation that sort of flexed with who you are. They developed you, they let you move into different roles. Being a leader and being led was paramount. So it was always such a phenomenal experience for me. I never really felt, besides my ability to deliver, that that grit or standing up for anything was what I needed, because we were trained in courageous conversations. So you would be very comfortable in going to somebody and saying, look, I'm not, that doesn't sit well with me, or I don't like how that happened. And we would have all been trained on how you have those conversations. I made a very informed decision to come back to Australia. My dad was unwell, so we moved back from the UK where I was working for Microsoft, and I made a very informed decision to start working with the public sector, based on some great advice from my mentor on making sure that I had private and public, and I had depth and breadth of both. So when I came back, I had an opportunity to continue working for Microsoft, which would have been like, working in the best organisation known to man for the rest of my life, which lots of my friends have done, or circled back and gone back to Microsoft. So that would have been a very comfortable decision. I had an opportunity to start as the head of customer service for NRMA, which also would have been a relatively comfortable position, or start a contract with the organisation that's now Transport for New South Wales, which was called Railcorp. I took Railcorp. And for me, the contrast between Microsoft's culture and maybe the culture of Railcorp was vast. And in that new organisation, I had lots of opportunities to really practice the things that I had stood up for. I was very comfortable in Microsoft, and we were all, if you said I instead of we, people would pull you up on it. It was a very, very strong culture of leadership and values, and coming into a culture that was a little bit different. It was a really difficult transition for me, but probably one of the best choices I've ever made, because, in that role I fell in love with the public service. I fell in love with transport and what it can do, and I fell in love with the depth and breadth of what public service can provide. But that probably new role, and obviously doing this with great respect, was really difficult for me, and allowed me to really practice that grit, standing up and saying, no, I'm sorry, this is the behaviour that I will accept, or, this is how we will speak to each other, this is how we will be as a leadership team. And it gave me a really good opportunity to test that out and role model it and stand true on all the things that I had said were important to me. And I think the end result is that, Rob Mason, who was the CEO, is an incredible human being I still keep in contact with. And as a result, we won a customer service award against all the private sector for the work that in the transformation space around customer service for Railcorp. And I think, I like to say that was the foundation that now, Gladys led and developed Transport for New South Wales. So, it had a great result, but it was a difficult personal journey for me because of the contrast in the organisations and the initial culture.
Jeanette, thank you so much for sharing that story. I mean, it's such a strong message for people, I think, and it goes right back to what you said at the beginning about having that deliberate path, that deliberate career path, and knowing where you wanted to go, that you want to go private, public, that you want to go broad and deep. And it reminds me of when I left corporate, and I was on a very, very happy salary, shall we say,
Yes.
to be self-employed as in professional development. And people were saying, you're absolutely nuts, Claire. You're going, you're taking like an 80% salary drop. And I said, but this is what I stand for.
It's your soul work. It's what you do well. And at the end of the day, money, that's a great example of grit there, Claire. That's your grit, is that you were brave enough to stand and understand who you were and stand for that. And I think lots of people don't know what to stand for from a grit perspective sometimes, because they don't know who they are. They don't know how would you define yourself in a sentence if you're standing in front of a panel. Whereas I'm very comfortable over the years of being very clear, and now with your great added value, I can add my grit and grace in the end of my strengths. I think that, that really helps when it comes to, both our paths of knowing where I need to be to do my best work.
Wow, thank you. So, yeah, I put it in earlier, but I knew that story was underneath there waiting to come out, so thank you. So balancing, so grace,
And grace.
you know, looking at the roles that you've performed, the word grace probably wouldn't
No.
be top of mind for some people. So why is leading with grace such, I believe, an essential attribute in
I
21st century
completely agree. And
leadership?
I think, Claire, again, it starts with the definition because, it's the same thing as kindness and courage. People go, oh, kind means you're soft and you're weak and you're incapable of delivering. That's why you've sort of got to say, oh, kindness and courage. And that's, I think, why you have to say grace and grit. Even though when I define or think about what grace means to me, I see that as a courageous attribute, because grace is how I think about things, how I act, how I carry myself, how I am with people, how they would describe me. Do I do the right thing? Am I respectful to, the deepest person in my organisation, right the way through to my minister? Do I help them succeed? Do I help them feel good about themselves? Do I know who they are? Do I know their names? Do I know what's important to them? That's what grace is for me. It's about being authentic. And I think authentic is hard. It really is. Being true to your values, embracing diversity, equity, inclusion, those things are hard. So I see grace as a strength as well. And I think in leadership now, when you look at, some of our amazing role models out there, Jacinta, I always mention her because I think she is doing a phenomenal job of being an incredibly strong, powerful leader who makes very good decisions, but she is inherently kind. And I think people are realising leadership is about somebody following you, Claire. And I'm not going to follow anybody that I don't like and I don't trust and I don't respect and I can't learn from. I'm not going to do that. And I'm lucky because I can make that choice in my career now. But there are people that are coming into the workforce and they have to follow these leaders who don't do it with grace and grit. And you will never get the best out of your person ever if you behave like that. I'm willing to bet that on anything. So, you've got a whole workforce out there, if you don't have leaders with grace and grit who are not working at their best potential, that are scared, that don't trust the organisation because you're not keeping them safe. And that is unacceptable. But more importantly than that, you will never achieve the things that you set out to do as an organisation because you don't have your people's hearts and minds. And all of that is proven. It's proven in the research, it's proven in the literature, Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, all. It's proof that if you don't do this, if you don't lead with grace and grit or kindness and courage or whatever, people like to define it at, people won't follow you and people won't perform. It's simple as that.
Couldn't agree with you more, Jeanette. And I'd like to ask a question around, and just from your experience, looking specifically at women in senior leadership positions today, do you think things are changing? Do you think, because there has been a sort of pattern in the past of some female leaders having that pressure and feeling that they needed to be more on the grit side than the grace side?
I certainly feel like there's a change, Claire, because of what we're seeing. We're seeing successful leaders who have them both. I think the research is really showing that now you are getting organisations, and, Microsoft got this back when I worked with them in the early 2000s and the late 90s. They knew that if you could have great leadership, and the more people that reported to you, the more time you got to spend being a leader and the more time you were measured on your capability to lead and the more you were developed on your ability to lead. They got that very early on. And you look at them as an organisation, they are, Bill is doing phenomenal things and the organisation is still growing and developing, and very recently I've worked for Boston Consulting. They lead exactly like that, which is one of the reasons I like working for them. They value you, they give you a voice, they make sure that as a case team, the leader is evaluated every single week on their ability to lead you well, every week. So I think it's changing. I definitely do. I think there's a bit of lip service to it, to be honest. You get into organisations and they're like, oh, we have this and we're going to behave like this, and then they don't. and that can make it inherently difficult. So I think there are, I like to call it, some dark places still, but I think there are a lot of great organisations leading the way. And if we vote at a senior level with our voices and our feet, so I won't work for an organisation, I won't stay in an organisation where the things that are important to me and the grace and the grit and the way of leadership is not role modelled right the way through to the top. I just won't do it.
Yeah.
So I vote with my, obviously I try and influence that, and if I can't, I'll vote with my feet. And I think it is an obligation of us as leaders, and not just female, but Telstra Business or Women's Awards give you that platform, and it is my deep responsibility to continue leading like that and be known for that. And the more senior I become, the more opportunity I have to influence that in the people that report to me, my peers, and the people that I report to. So I think it's changing, but it's going to have to take a huge amount of momentum for it to continue in every organisation. And deep in organisations, you need to be brave as well. If you're not seeing that, and you don't feel safe, and you're in an environment that isn't allowing you to be your best self, if you can't vote with your feet, then speak up. There are processes that allow you to do that, and be brave enough to say, I'm not accepting this way of being. And I'm not saying it's the most difficult thing you will ever do, but if we all stay true to ourselves and we all stay true to what's important, and people see that we do that, that's how we're going to make sure this change lasts forever, and it's a strong change.
Wow. That's a powerful message. I'm glad we're recording this so you can listen back to yourself. There's so many things I'm getting from this. That whole taking the example from Microsoft is that how many organizations are actually taking leadership as a core element of
Yep.
to say that, this is something that is inherent in everything that we do. And as you develop as a leader, we will in turn reward and develop you.
The best model I've ever had. And when people say, why are you good at what you do, it's because I worked for organisations like Microsoft who taught me how to be great at what I did. And if I hadn't had that 8 years with them, I wouldn't be the leader I am today. It's a bit of that nature nurture. I think naturally I'm, leadership and who I am, the grace and the grit is a little bit of who I am, but my ability to use it to be effective came from time in great organisations like that. And people, when I'm mentoring, people say, "Oh, what career choices should I make?" And I'm like, go for organisations that make you, and go for organisations that break you, because both those things will make you the best leader you can possibly be.
Wow. And that comes back to the courage to do it. And so there's a couple of other things that I picked up in that as well, one from earlier and one more recently, that I'd love to explore and give you the choice as to which one you want to talk about first. The one is around the role of mentoring in your whole career, and the difference that's made, and the importance of mentoring. And then the other one was around that psychological safety, creating a culture where people feel empowered and courageous enough to be able to speak up. Could you speak a little
absolutely. I mean, I'll start with mentor, because the safety one's going to get me a bit passionate. But I mean, I right from early on have always had a mentor, and I do a mentor up, so someone who can develop me, and I look up to them, and I aspire to be as amazing as they are. So at the moment, I have the absolute privilege of having the incredible Barbara Pierce, who runs Alan Pierce's organisation, Mr. Body Language, and is the most published female on factual books in Australia, and is a glorious human being. So I have the honour of having her. So I look up, I find someone that I aspire to be, who lives the values I live, but will, really hold me to account to who I am and deeply believe in my path. And then I have a tribe of women who I suppose I could call peers, but I think they're better than my peers. I've developed a tribe of women that I've sort of collected. Sounds like beautiful stones, doesn't it? They'll laugh when they listen to this. Oh, you didn't collect us. But I collected them on the way of my journey of all my work. I have as part of my tribe, my best friend who I worked with Microsoft, however long ago that was, it seems like a lifetime. But in every single organisation, I've sort of found my soulmate in regards to the connection. They might be completely opposite. They teach me something I would never understand, or we're so similar we finish each other's sentences. So I have a group of about 18 to 20 of those women in my life that I've had for many years, who mentor me, who I check in with, who tell me to stand up when I can't stand up, tell me to sit down when I'm saying too much, those sort of women in my life, and I can't underestimate that as a mentor. And then I spend a lot of time making sure that I choose 2 to 5, depending on my workload, women or men that I will mentor. So it's almost like a complete circle. And the reason I talk to that, Claire, is because sometimes the people I mentor teach me more than anyone else in that circle. So, the way they think, those sort of things. So I call it my circle of mentoring, and it's always played a very, very important part in my life and my development, and it always will. And it ebbs and flows with what you need. I will choose not necessarily the tribe because they're very constant, but I'll choose the mentor and the mentoring based on where I am and what I need, or what I can give at that stage. So that's the mentor.
Actually, can I just interject there? Because you've just brought back a memory for me. So when I first arrived in Australia, I was based on the Sunshine Coast, and I joined the Sunshine Coast Business Women's Network. And I facilitated the Business
my
Women's
goodness.
Mentoring
We
Program
would
for
know
2 years.
everybody. I walk with Michelle Hammer a couple of mornings a week.
Yeah, I know Michelle. And what you just said then about learning from the mentees, and I'm still in touch with so many of them. And my goodness, what a wonderfully reciprocal
Oh, I
relationship
bet.
it
And that's
was.
such a good mention, Claire, because, and that's something I had left out. So thank you so much for bringing it. The first thing I did when I came to join the Coast was I joined as part of Sunshine Coast Council. We were members of Sunshine Coast Business Women's Network. But one of the first things I did when I left Council is I joined them as a private member, because that network, that support, White and her team, Paula and Michelle and Min, and all of them are just the most astounding human beings. And I nominated 2 of my staff for their awards last year, and Frances Cayley, who ran my property branch, who is a phenomenal leader, won the Sunshine Coast Businesswoman of the Year. And what the opportunities that's given her to have a voice, to meet, to mentor, is just open doors for her that will, put her in good stead forever. And I'm so grateful for that. So another great thing, to your point, would be go and find a network that allows you to meet other amazing women, particularly when you're new to an area.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. So thank you. And so onto your passion, your passion of psychological safety.
I've actually been researching it quite a lot lately, and it really resonates with me because, again, one of the things I learnt very early on in my career it's part of the model of the 5 behaviours of cohesive teams, where the bottom of that triangle is trust. I live and breathe that, and have from the minute I had one person report to me. That triangle sits in every office I have. It's sat on every desk I've had, because it's sort of fundamental to how I lead. Because if I can't establish trust, for the people who work for me, the people I work for, the people that are around me, then I can't get to commitment. I can't have courageous conversations with them, and I can't, take responsibility for what I have to do, and therefore I can't deliver. So I absolutely fundamentally believe that. So it's almost the first thing it is the first thing I do in every organisation I go into, is I spend time establishing trust. And I win it by proving that I am trustworthy over and over and over again, until it's not debatable. So I would, hand on heart, have you ask anybody that's ever worked with me, for me, or I've worked with, and said to them, do you trust Jeanette? And that's so fundamental to me. And trust and safety and psychological safety go hand in hand for me. Because when I'm establishing trust, I'm establishing a protection around you, Claire, that says you are safe with me. I will keep you safe. COVID will keep you physically safe. That's probably one of the first times I've had to, besides when I worked in DV, really think about physical and wellness safety. But when I say I'm going to keep you, I'm going to build your trust, I'm going to keep you safe, I'm going to keep you safe in your trust of me, I'm going to keep you safe in this organisation, I'm going to listen to your voice, I'm going to make sure you come to work every day and you are your best self. And if you don't feel safe, I'm going to do something about it. And I think that is a non-negotiable as a leader. I really think, and it's a non-negotiable as an organisation. If you have people in your organisation that don't feel safe mentally, if there's some anxiety or there's, they want to work flexible hours because of something, if people do not trust you and do not feel safe, then you are not doing the right thing as an organisation for that person. And nowadays with, mental illness and the things that we're starting to become aware of that we need to work with and we need to support people with, those and also non-negotiables. This is the world that we live in. And as a leader, you need to understand those things. You need to understand how to support them. And you need to be empathetic and really, really apply your grace and grit around those individual circumstances. And I'm not saying you be all soft and mushy and, and all that sort of stuff, but be empathetic, understand what someone else is going through and do what you need to do as a leader to balance what your organisation needs. And I'm not underplaying that, but balance that safety of that individual in your organisation, because you think how much time people spend at work. If we're not letting them be or making sure that they are protected by that bubble of psychological safety for how many hours in a week, that is unacceptable.
You've really got me thinking here, though, Jeanette, and so I'm trying to think that with that as an absolute non-negotiable, you must have had experience in the past where you're creating, in a way, a microculture of safety and trust. That how do you then influence the rest of the organisation?
That's a really good question, and it's difficult. I think one of the things that has made it easier for me is usually in my corporate portfolio, I look after HR. So that really helps me almost create a foundation or a part of the organisation that has a great power to seep into the organisation that really can role model and set some benchmarks around psychological safety. In the policies that we have, in the way that, the HRBPs work with their leaders, it's almost like you're able to infiltrate the organisation with people that get it and know how to do it and can support leaders and the rest of the organisation in doing it properly. So that gives me a very good leverage in regards to being able to do that. But in organisations where I haven't looked after HR, I do find that I will spend some time influencing and working with my CEO and my peers on the benefits of doing it and talk to them about how you do it, because sometimes people just don't know how, or it's not intentional that they don't. I always go with a 3 strikes and you're out type of relationship on, let me show you how, let me help you, let me stand beside you, let me stand behind you, let me show you how to do this, and let me explain why there's a business benefit to you, and let me show you what that business benefit is. So it just becomes influence. But if you influence in the right way, that you explain the consequences if you don't keep people safe, or if they're refusing to do it, then they get to see what those consequences are. Sometimes it has to be a lived experience. So I'll give it every single effort I possibly can. And as I said, I have a 3 strikes and you're out rule. And then you have to vote with your feet, right?
Speaking. Oh, just such a wonderful conversation. I wanted to just go on a tangent slightly, because I know you're going to be moving to maybe commuting to Canberra, maybe working virtually.
Heaven forbid, what was I?
And you're going to be joining the Boston Consulting Group. Tell me what in your deliberate career portfolio, what are you going to give, and what are you going to get from
question.
this next move?
I love Boston Consulting Group. They remind me of my time at Microsoft in regards to their culture and the way that they function and the way they treat me as an individual who works for them. So that is a very big choice for me in working for an organisation that value me, that hear my voice, that develop me. The case teams I get to work on are just the most, incredibly highly intelligent, capable human beings I've probably ever worked with, to be honest. And I have great respect for their principles. They really get an organisation and feel great value. I've worked with them for many, many years, starting all the way back in Railcorp. They were the ones that helped me do the transformation for customer service in Railcorp. And for many years after that, I would ring them and ask for help on something, and they would just help me. They would give me great advice, or they would guide me in the right direction. And I value that from a consultant's perspective. I think that shows that they really care about what they do. As I said, I'd made a really informed choice, Claire, to do the depth and breadth. I've had a great experience doing local council. I loved local council. I loved touring the toilets in Budrum with Ted. I loved going up to Mapleton with the most darling Rojo. I loved Jenny's, everywhere she went, everybody knew who she was. Steve Robinson and his passion for his area and the things that he's done that I still drive past and think, oh, Steve did that. And I loved that. That was just such a great experience. I know this coast. I do that fantastic ROS quiz in the Sunshine Coast Daily on a Saturday, and I beat the whole family hands down because I know where the roads and mountains are. I know where this is. And that was just such a great learning experience for me to really, and I wanted to do local so that I could really touch the grassroots. And I've and that's what I had an opportunity to do. But the opportunity to go and work for Boston, a team that have great leadership, accountability and intellect. Prime Minister and Cabinet is run by one of the best bosses I've ever had, Phil Gations, who worked running New South Wales Treasury when I was there, and the Fin Times called him the greatest financial mind of our times. And he is a leader who balances grace and grit. I'm not quite sure if you like me explaining him that way, but the reason that I say that is because he's smart, but he's kind. He's respectable. He's capable. He's a great learner. He's never had any arrogance to ask you what you think, and I am always deeply humbled to be asked what I think by a man like him. So I am honoured to go and do whatever it takes to help Prime Minister and Cabinet deliver the APS reforms. But I love transformation, Claire. The work that we're going to be working on, the Reform Office, is the APS reforms for the Prime Minister, which is developing a world-class Australian public service. So the diversity and breadth of the transformation work, from workplace and culture to structures and op models to citizen and business engagement to, I think, investment and resourcing to policy, data, innovation and productivity. So the scope of that transformation is endless, and what a great career opportunity for me to continue transformation, which is my soul work, but to do it across the whole APS and to do it working for an organisation I love and a boss I respect. It gets no better than that, does it? I'm prepared to go to -1 for that, Claire. I'm prepared to do that. If we could open a border, please, so I could get on a plane, please, Premier, that would be greatly appreciated, so I can go and do the work that I want to do for the organisation I would like to work for, please.
And I can hear the passion, I can hear the energy and the enthusiasm in that opportunity, and I think that I think Phil and the team are lucky to have you.
And you've got to go, back to my point, Claire, where I said go work for organisations that make you and go work for organisations that break you. You need to, I purposely in my career choose, right now I want to go work, for something that lights me up and in an organisation I feel safe in. And, you make those choices depend on the ebbs and flows of your career, and that's important things to do because it restores you when you have someone who says to you, what do you think? Because you think, wow, what I think is valuable, and that keeps you on that path of that deep belief that you're bringing value to an organisation.
And talking about making choices, I know that you're going to have to go soon. Can you share with our listeners why you've got to go and the choice that you've made?
Yes,
at the
I'm
moment?
because I've got some time off between the roles because I'm waiting to be able to fly to Canberra. I've been volunteering for the COVID Care Army, and they send you each week or sometimes fortnightly an email that says, "Look, can you do this for us, or can you do that for us?" So at the moment, they're picking up letters from the local school and delivering it to the local nursing home. So to have an opportunity to do things like that in your life is also so good for you, because it makes you realise what reality is like and helps you take a breath and all those really important things at the end of the day that complete you. So, I'm not quite sure how long the COVID Army will go for, but it was such a wonderful initiative to be a part of.
And perspective is everything
It
these days, isn't
really
it,
is. And
Jeanette?
be kind. COVID was amazing in what it taught us to, positivity, I think, is my seventh strength. So I tend to see everything, from a positive perspective anyway. So for me, COVID was, I got to have breakfast and lunch and dinner with my family every day. My husband's a fly in and out. So, we got to be a family. We'd go on family adventures together. And, so for me, it was just such a huge benefit to have time together, and appreciate the things that we took for granted, restaurants and going away and, things that you just were part of your normal everyday life. My positivity is dropping a bit now because I want to get on a plane and go to work. I'll have to figure out what the other side of the coin is for that at the moment, probably forcing me to take time to do things I would never normally do.
So to wrap things up, I've just got so many golden nuggets from this conversation. It's just I'm so fired up, and it's probably a crazy question to ask because I don't know that there is one. But anyway, if there was one key message around leading with grit and grace that you could leave our listeners with, if there was one golden nugget that topped it all, that wrapped it all up, what would your last message be?
It's hard to get one, isn't it? When I thought, and I know you'd given me this question before, but I tend to, with the questions, try not to prep them too much because I think sometimes then it doesn't come from the heart. I think it's better just to respond with your gut sometimes when someone asks you a question.
Yeah.
So, I think for me, I think it's that you can't balance grace and grit if you don't know who you are. So for me, if I think about the path I took to be able to talk to you and hand on heart say, being a leader that balances grace and grit makes me a successful leader, and I know that with my heart. But how did I get there? I think I got there by understanding who I was and believing in that, and following that path. I think I got there with being very clear about what those two words meant to me, and then living those words. So, brave, gutsy and courageous, can I give you multiple examples of where I have demonstrated that? Well, yes, I can. Grace, can I give you multiple of examples where, I've realised with great power comes great responsibility? Yes, I can. So I think it's about knowing who you are, defining what those words mean to you, and figuring out how you can live them, just in your every single day, and test them. Don't do something that doesn't work for you. That's why I say define them yourself, and then test them and see if, by being that type of leader, you get a better trust foundation, that people follow you more, that people perform better, that people trust you and feel safe and to be their best selves. Test it, and see if it works for you. But, provide a grit or a strength or a backbone that allows people to look at you and say, wow, he is so resilient and they recover quickly. How do I do that? And that's why I always share my personal story, because, I don't want people to think, you get to be the Telstra Businesswoman of the Ward because, of the year, because you were brought up in private schools and you never had anything tough. And not that that's a bad thing, but I want people to realise you can come from anywhere. You can make something of yourself. And sometimes when you come from somewhere that was dark, it allows you to realise that nothing, and for me, not much scares me nowadays. which is my grit, but I have such a deep, incredible empathy for how people feel, which is my grace, because I know how terrible it feels to be hurt or bullied, or, I really do. And so I never want anyone in my care to ever feel like that, ever. So those two things just are who I am. So, use your experiences to shape who you are and what those things mean to you, and then use them and test them and see if they work. And if they work, keep on doing it. But as leaders at our level of seniority, Claire, you have a responsibility for those people, the amount of time that they spend with you. Every single person will look back in their lives and say, right from their teachers, we all know our favourite teachers' names, right? I still do. I remember when I went to school, but I still remember my favourite teacher. I can still name my favourite bosses. I can still name the people who had the biggest influence on my ability to believe in myself throughout my work. I can name the organisations where I felt I was doing my best work. And don't underestimate how important that is at the end of someone's life, that they can do that, And I was just recently asking for recommendations for my website, and someone who was my graduate a long time ago reached out and said, I'll do one. And I read his and I cried, because it was so beautiful, and it said, you've influenced my life to this day by the way that you led me, and now I lead like that. And that for me, look, I'm teary. That for me, and that's 15 years later or whatever it is now, that for me is more important than anything in the world, because I've created an army of people who will keep others safe. And if that's the last thing that I do, then I'd be happy with that.
What a wonderful legacy. Thank you, Jeanette. It was a joy. It was an inspiration. I think we need another
We
podcast
do.
in the future, because
I
you
wanted
just
to
shared.
talk about
Oh
no
my
more fake
goodness!
smiles, because that's my big at
I
the moment.
know. There's just so much. I think you might be my first ever return guest. In the meantime, go do your wonderful work with the COVID care family. All the very best for your move to -1 in Canberra. Go well, stay well. Thank you so much.